What if the most dangerous criminals in the world weren't hunted by weapons, but by understanding? For years, television taught us that crimes are solved with fingerprints, DNA, and surveillance. But Criminal Minds asked a far more unsettling question. What happens when the only way to catch a killer is to think like one? From the very first episode, the series pulled viewers into the minds of predators, into their patterns, compulsions, and breaking points. Each case wasn't just about bodies or crime scenes, but about behavior, about childhood trauma left untreated, about obsessions that grew in silence, about the thin psychological line separating control from chaos. Inside the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, profiling wasn't a tactic. It was a race against time. The faster the team understood why an unsub killed, the faster they could stop the next victim from becoming a statistic. But Criminal Minds wasn't just dark for shock value. It was disturbing because it felt possible. As the seasons unfolded, the series shifted from weekly procedural to psychological endurance tests, not just for criminals, but for the profilers themselves. Trauma followed them home. Guilt lingered. And every solved case left scars that no badge could erase. Today on Cinema Uncovered, we're diving deep into Criminal Minds franchise, its origins, its unforgettable characters, its most chilling unsubs, and the psychological realism that kept audiences watching even when it made them uncomfortable. This is not a story about catching killers. This is a story about understanding them. And once you do, there's no turning back. When Criminal Minds premiered in 2005, television was already saturated with crime dramas. Audiences were used to blood spatter analysis, glowing lab screens, and last-minute forensic breakthroughs. Shows like CSI and Law and Order focus on evidence, what was left behind at the crime scene, and how it could be used in court. Criminal Minds went in the opposite direction. Instead of beginning with evidence, it began with behavior. Created by Jeff Davis, the series placed viewers inside the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, a team tasked not with solving crimes after they happened, but stopping the next one before it occurred. Their weapon of choice wasn't technology. It was pattern recognition, psychological profiling, and an uncomfortable willingness to think like a killer. From the start, the show broke a major television rule. It often revealed the criminal early in the episode. By doing this, Criminal Minds shifted suspense away from who did it to when will they strike again. The tension didn't come from mystery. It came from inevitability. Viewers watched helplessly as the unsub moved closer to their next victim, while the BAU raced against time. This structure made the show feel less like a puzzle and more like a psychological countdown. Even more unsettling was how the series framed its villains. Many unsubs weren't masterminds. They were fractured individuals shaped by neglect, trauma, and obsession. The show didn't excuse their crimes, but it forced viewers to confront an uncomfortable truth. Evil often has an origin story. In doing so, Criminal Minds carved out a unique identity, one that blended crime procedural with psychological horror. It wasn't just about catching monsters. It was about understanding how they were made. And once the show crossed that line, there was no going back. What truly set Criminal Minds apart wasn't just the cases. It was the people tasked with solving them. The Behavioral Analysis Unit wasn't portrayed as a group of flawless heroes. Instead, it was a collection of specialists, each carrying their own scars, strengths, and psychological limits. Together, they formed a team that felt human in a genre often dominated by procedural detachment. At the center was David Rossi, a founding profiler whose experience came at a cost. Rossi represented the long shadow of the job, decades of exposure to violence, regret over missed signs, and the weight of knowing that some cases never truly end. His presence grounded the team in reality, reminding viewers that profiling isn't just about intelligence. It's about endurance. Then there was Derek Morgan, whose physical presence often masked deep emotional intelligence. Morgan connected with victims in ways statistics couldn't, drawing on his own traumatic past to recognize pain in others. His character reinforced one of the show's central ideas. Empathy can be as powerful as logic. Jennifer Jarrow, often seen as the team's emotional anchor, served as the bridge between the BAU and the families left behind. Through her, the series emphasized that crimes don't exist in isolation. They ripple outward, devastating lives long after the case is closed. Emily Prentice brought resilience shaped by secrecy and survival. Her arc explored identity, loyalty, and the personal cost of living in constant danger. Prentice wasn't fearless. She was functional in the face of fear, a distinction the show treated with rare honesty. And then there was Dr. Spencer Reed. Reed became the soul of Criminal Minds, a genius with encyclopedic knowledge and social vulnerability. He embodied the show's emotional contradiction. Brilliance doesn't protect you from trauma. Across the seasons, viewers watched Reed endure addiction, loss, imprisonment, and grief, often without the emotional armor his colleagues relied on. What made the BAU compelling wasn't that they always won. It was that every case took something from them. Unlike traditional procedurals where characters reset each episode, Criminal Minds allowed damage to accumulate. The job followed them home. Nightmares lingered. Relationships fractured. The series quietly acknowledged a truth rarely explored on television. Understanding evil comes with a psychological price. And the deeper the BAU looked into the minds of killers, the harder it became to escape them. In most crime shows, villains exist to be defeated. In Criminal Minds, they exist to be understood. The series didn't treat its unsubs as faceless monsters hiding in the shadows. Instead, it forced viewers to confront them up close, often showing their routines, their rituals, and the moments when control slipped. By revealing the killer early, the show made the audience unwilling witnesses to crimes that felt disturbingly inevitable. What made these unsubs so unsettling wasn't just what they did. It was how plausible they felt. Many were not criminal masterminds. They were broken individuals shaped by abuse, neglect, rejection, or untreated mental illness. Some killed to feel powerful. Others killed to feel seen. And some killed simply because violence had become the only language they understood. The show rarely offered comfort. Even when an unsub was caught, there was no triumphant resolution. Only silence, grief, and the knowledge that the damage was already done. Victims weren't statistics. They were people with families, routines, and futures abruptly erased. This approach made Criminal Minds feel less like entertainment and more like psychological exposure. Viewers weren't protected by distance. They were placed inside the mind of someone unraveling and asked to stay there until the end. Some unsubs became infamous not because of spectacle, but because of restraint. Their calm voices, their rationalizations, their belief that what they were doing made sense. That quiet conviction was often far more disturbing than overt brutality. The series also explored an uncomfortable truth. Not all killers fit a single profile. Some were impulsive. Some were meticulous. Some were painfully ordinary. Evil didn't always announce itself. It blended in. And that's what made the unsubs of Criminal Minds linger. They didn't disappear when the credits rolled. They stayed because they felt possible. Because they reminded viewers that the line between normal and monstrous isn't always visible. And sometimes, it's only one breaking point away. For a show rooted so deeply in psychology, Criminal Minds walked a fine line between realism and television dramatization. The behavioral analysis unit is real. Profiling is real. But the way the BAU operates on screen is complicated. In reality, FBI profilers rarely kick down doors or confront suspects in the field. Their work is largely analytical, reviewing case files, consulting with local law enforcement, and developing behavioral assessments over weeks or even months. Arrests and tactical operations are usually handled by other units. Criminal Minds compressed that process into a single episode. Timelines were accelerated. Breakthroughs came at the last possible second. Profiles were delivered dramatically, often moments before a killer struck again. It wasn't accurate, but it was intentional. The show wasn't trying to document procedure. It was trying to capture psychological urgency. And in that sense, it succeeded. Former profilers have noted that while the show exaggerated speed and access, it often got the thinking right. Patterns of escalation, signature behaviors, childhood trauma, and stress triggers are genuine components of behavioral analysis. The logic behind the profiles, why a killer chooses certain victims, locations, or methods, was often rooted in real criminal psychology. Where the show took liberties was uncertainty. Real profiling is probabilistic. It deals in likelihoods, not absolutes. But television demands confidence. So the BAU spoke in declarations rather than possibilities, creating a sense of authority that made the profiles feel almost prophetic. The show also blurred the line between mental illness and criminality, a criticism it frequently faced. While Criminal Minds emphasized that mental illness alone does not cause violence, its storytelling sometimes leaned on extreme psychological conditions to heighten drama. Yet despite these flaws, the series achieved something rare. It made viewers think about crime before it happened. It reframed violence not as an isolated act, but as the end result of patterns ignored, warnings missed, and systems that failed long before the first victim. Criminal Minds may not have been a documentary, but it captured an emotional truth that stuck with audiences long after the facts faded. Because in the end, understanding behavior isn't about being exact. It's about being close enough to stop the next tragedy. After more than a decade on air, Criminal Minds reached a crossroads. By the later seasons, the familiar rhythm of weekly cases began to show signs of fatigue. Cast departures changed the chemistry of the BAU. Storylines grew heavier, and the emotional toll on the characters became increasingly visible. What once felt relentless now felt exhausting, by design or by circumstance. In 2020, after 15 seasons, the series came to an end. But Criminal Minds was never truly finished. The franchise returned with Criminal Minds, Evolution, a revival that reflected how television and its audience had changed. Gone was the purely episodic structure. In its place came serialized storytelling, longer arcs, and a single antagonist whose influence stretched across an entire season. The tone was darker, more cynical, more patient. Where the original series focused on stopping crimes and progress, Evolution examined the aftermath, how isolation, societal fracture, and unchecked trauma could create something far more dangerous than a lone unsub. It wasn't just about killers anymore. It was about systems breaking down. This shift divided fans, but it also proved something important. Criminal Minds was willing to evolve. Few crime shows last long enough to redefine themselves. Even fewer managed to stay culturally relevant while doing it. The franchise influenced how crime television approached psychology, paving the way for darker, more character-driven storytelling. It also left a real-world impact. The show sparked interest in criminal psychology, behavioral science, and law enforcement careers. It changed how viewers understood profiling, not as mind reading, but as pattern recognition shaped by empathy and experience. Today, Criminal Minds exists as more than procedural. It's a psychological archive, one that documented fear, resilience, and the cost of understanding evil for nearly 2 decades. And its legacy isn't just in the cases solved, but in the reminder that darkness doesn't appear overnight. It builds, it waits, and someone has to be willing to look directly at it. Dark details you may have missed. Matthew Gray Gubler directed several of the show's most unsettling episodes, including fan favorites known for their psychological intensity and visual restraint. The term unsub, short for unknown subject, was rarely used on television before Criminal Minds, but the show helped popularize it in mainstream crime storytelling. Many episodes were inspired by real criminal case studies, though details were often altered to avoid direct parallels to real victims. The BAU headquarters shown on the series is fictional. However, the real FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit is based in Quantico, Virginia. Several episodes were edited or restricted internationally due to their disturbing themes, particularly those involving children or ritualistic crimes. Spencer Reed's migraines, insomnia, and addiction arc were written to reflect genuine stress responses experienced by individuals exposed to prolonged trauma. Guest actors who played unsubs were often told not to watch other episodes before filming, to avoid mimicking performances and keep each portrayal distinct. Despite its darkness, the show maintained a strong focus on victim empathy, often dedicating final moment of episodes to quiet reflection rather than celebration. Criminal Minds ran for 15 seasons, making it one of the longest-running crime dramas in television history. The revival series Criminal Minds, Evolution removed network television restrictions, allowing for harsher language, darker themes, and more serialized storytelling. Criminal Minds didn't just tell stories about killers. It told stories about what happens when we try to understand them. For nearly 2 decades, the BAU reminded us that evil isn't always obvious. It can hide in plain sight, shaped by trauma, obsession, and the choices we make or fail to make. And sometimes, the scariest part isn't the unsub on screen. It's the realization that anyone could become the next case if warning signs are ignored. The show's legacy isn't in the arrests or solved cases. It's in its willingness to explore fear, morality, and the psychological toll of confronting darkness. It's in the humanity of the profilers, carrying scars no badge can erase. And it's in the unsettling truth that understanding evil comes with a cost a BAU paid every day. Criminal Minds may have ended on screen, but its influence endures. In crime dramas that followed, an audience is fascinated by human behavior, and in the quiet reflection each episode demanded of us. Because once you step inside a killer's mind, you never look at the world the same way again. This has been Cinema Uncovered. Step carefully, watch closely, and remember, the mind is the most dangerous crime scene of all.